WPBF 25 News at 6 starts with breaking news.
For breaking news headlines tonight at 6, let's start with the race for the White House. Donald Trump is now officially the Republican nominee for president. This after receiving the votes of enough delegates at the Republican National Convention. Trump has also selected Ohio Senator J.D. Vance as his pick for vice president.
These major developments unfolding on day one of the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee. And here are some live pictures from inside the convention hall, where security is a top concern. This after that assassination attempt on Trump at a rally in Pennsylvania just 2 days ago. New details are also emerging tonight about the shooter.
And here locally, a federal judge in Fort Pierce has dismissed Trump's classified documents case. Within the last few minutes, we've learned special counsel Jack Smith will appeal the ruling. Good evening. I'm Felicia Rodriguez.
I'm Tiffany Kenny. Thank you so much for joining us. We have a lot to get to tonight. We have a team of reporters across our viewing area covering these stories from every angle.
Our co-anchor Todd McDermott kicks off our live team coverage tonight from Mar-a-Lago with new insight into Donald Trump's VP pick and Trump officially securing that GOP nomination. Todd?
So much has happened in the last 48 hours, Felicia and Tiffany, including very recently J.D. Vance sealing the deal. Senator Vance met with the former president here at Mar-a-Lago. That meeting obviously convinced the former president to choose the Ohio senator as his running mate. As you mentioned, Donald Trump, make it 3 times. He will lead the GOP again, nominated a 3rd time as his presidential candidate. It was easy, it was expected, and it came about 3 hours ago. As it stands tonight, he would face the incumbent president, Joe Biden, in November. The former president is in Milwaukee for the Republican National Convention. It began today, quickly making Trump the nominee again. Just after 3 o'clock this afternoon, Donald Trump received enough votes to become the presidential nominee again. The delegation from Florida, his now home state, putting him over the top. And those words came from his son, Eric, there on the convention hall floor in Milwaukee during the roll call. Prior to this, Trump had announced that J.D. Vance of Ohio would be his running mate. On Saturday afternoon, as you know, prior to Trump being shot in an assassination attempt at a rally in Pennsylvania, ABC News reported that Donald Trump had recently met privately with Senator Vance, as well as Florida Senator Marco Rubio and North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum here at Mar-a-Lago. And as I said, Vance sealed the deal in those meetings. We know that Don Trump Jr. is a big fan and is close to Vance as well. Earlier this afternoon, ABC News reported that both Senator Rubio and Governor Burgum had been told they had not been chosen, leaving it to the 39, soon to be 40-year-old senator from Ohio. Now, here locally, Fort Pierce federal judge Aileen Cannon, as you mentioned, dismissed the classified documents case against Donald Trump. Judge Cannon said the appointment of special counsel Jack Smith violated the Constitution, upholding a last-ditch motion by the Trump defense to try to get this case thrown out. Our Terry Parker is live at the federal courthouse in Fort Pierce with more on that. And this decision, Terry, surprised everyone, likely including the defense lawyers for Donald Trump.
It certainly did, Todd, because they have, as you said, put forward many motions trying to get this case thrown out. However, this one, Aileen Cannon, this morning issuing her ruling saying that as far as her reading goes, that the Justice Department did not have the authority to appoint a special prosecutor in the first place. Therefore, the case has to be thrown out. As you said, she said, according to the Constitution, this type of action violates that.
The case follows the FBI search on Mar-a-Lago in 2022 when agents seized dozens of documents stored there. Some they said were classified, highly sensitive, and shouldn't have been held there after repeated requests to Trump to turn them over. Donald Trump has appeared here in federal court numerous times fighting the charges, often in the same courtroom with special counsel Jack Smith. Last month, Trump's attorneys argued that Smith's appointment was not authorized by the Constitution, that only Congress could appoint such a special prosecutor. Cannon agrees, writing the appointment effectively usurps the authority of Congress. ABC News sources say Trump is thrilled and is calling this dismissal an act of divine intervention. He posted on Truth Social the other cases against him also should be quickly dismissed.
And just now we have gotten a statement from the special counsel Smith's spokesperson, Peter Carr, saying the dismissal of the case deviates from the uniform conclusion of all previous courts who have considered the issue that the Attorney General is statutorily authorized to appoint a special counsel. The Justice Department has authorized a special counsel to appeal the court's order. We don't know how long that appeal will take, but already this case was widely believed not to have been in any way able to have been started before the election in November. It may not happen for quite a while now as it wends its way through the appeals court. Reporting live from Fort Pierce, I'm Terry Parker. Todd, back to you.
And Terry, of course, if it ever happens, if Donald Trump were to be elected again as president, he could have this case scuttled as well. Again, that ruling overturning more than 30 years of judicial decisions and legal precedent. Let's continue our coverage now from the Republican National Convention. As I mentioned, Ohio Senator J.D. Vance, formally nominated as Donald Trump's running mate. Here's new video of Senator Vance entering the convention floor within the past hour. Again, he is a two-year senator, former best-selling author. He's a Yale Law School graduate and turns 40 first week of August. So we're calling him 39, he'll be 40 most of this campaign running up to November. Not long after the Trump campaign announced his vice presidential running mate, his campaign posted their first campaign ad on the social media platform formerly known as Twitter. That's X. It features a montage of J.D. Vance praising Trump. President Biden first remarks on Donald Trump's running mate called J.D. Vance a, quote, clone of Trump on the issues. Now back to what happened in Pennsylvania on Saturday, the attempted assassination of Donald Trump. The director of the Secret Service announcing the agency has implemented changes to the security detail to ensure the continued protection of the former president along the campaign trail. Again, President Biden had ordered the Secret Service to do all necessary to fix this after what happened Saturday. Trump was shot in the ear Saturday during that assassination attempt while speaking at a campaign rally near Pittsburgh. One of the three spectators who was also shot died. Two others were wounded. Snipers shot and killed the 20-year-old shooter immediately. He had been on the roof of a building just 160 yards away from where Trump was speaking on a stage at the podium. ABC News now reports that building was actually the staging area for the local police tactical team that was watching over the crowd. And he appeared on the roof of that building with a clear view of the former president. Sources previously told ABC News the building had been checked out. Investigators are now trying to determine whether roof access had been properly locked down. Some reports say that a local police officer did confront the shooter seconds before he turned the rifle on the stage and on the former president. The U.S. Secret Service facing some very tough questions about security at the campaign rally on Saturday, as well as the security going into this Republican National Convention in Milwaukee. Jay Jarvis now joins me live to talk about what others have to say about what happened Saturday and what we do going forward. And Jade, I know you spoke with a former Secret Service agent.
Yeah, that's right, Todd. I spoke with Joe LaSorsa. He was Secret Service for 20 years from 1976 to 1996. He says the agency will likely now be going over any security plans and procedures with a fine-tooth comb.
My take is that we were very lucky. We dodged a silver bullet.
All eyes now on the U.S. Secret Service after former President Trump's attempted assassination. A 20-year-old taking aim at Trump from a rooftop roughly 164 yards away.
Luckily, they had a counter-sniper team deployed that immediately took out the assailant. And who knows how many lives that saved.
Joe LaSorsa is a former Secret Service agent who worked on President Ronald Reagan's detail after his assassination attempt in 1981. He has some questions about the measures taken to protect Trump.
It concerns me that they did not at least have an agent or a police officer on that roof. That is the shortcoming. And had they had an officer or an agent on that roof, we might not be speaking right now.
But overall, he believes the agents did their job.
If they feel that the individual or the situation calls for a shot, they take it. They did well.
We also spoke with Stuart Kaplan, a former special agent with the FBI. He is criticizing the Secret Service and believes they did not bring in enough resources to ensure Trump's safety. He says the agency employs not only boots-on-the-ground security, but also in the air by way of aircraft and drones, and that if the appropriate resources were in place, the threat could have been avoided.
had they had the appropriate assets in place, this could have never happened, because this individual would have been neutralized before he would have even had the opportunity to traverse up on the ladder and get onto the rooftop.
Now, the Secret Service has said that they do not plan to make any changes to the security plan at the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee, and that they are confident with the measures that they have put in place. However, this morning, the director of the agency said that after Saturday's incident, they have implemented some changes to Trump's security detail to ensure his protection. Reporting live tonight, Jade Jarvis, WPBF 25 News, Todd.
Jade, thank you so much for that. And we should note that this campaign event in Pennsylvania was planned just 10 days in advance, because the campaign is choosing where to go very late, because Donald Trump is not the president. They have to form their team and form their formulation for security at each venue in a period of about a week or so. The director of the Secret Service will testify before Congress likely next week. The assassination attempt, of course, is raising concerns for all candidates in this very emotional and high-stakes election season. Angela Rozier continues our live team coverage from Palm Beach Gardens. Angela, I know you spoke with local campaign managers about their candidates and their thoughts about security going forward towards November.
Todd, a lot of people didn't want to talk about security. They still feel uncomfortable after what happened over the weekend. But those who did talk about security say they will continue to do what they've been doing. And we also reached out to a security expert for his take. As Election Day gets closer, we could see more campaign events. We reached out to several local campaign managers to see if they plan on making any changes when it comes to security after the attempted assassination of former President Donald Trump. One candidate in the St. Lucie County Sheriff's race says security is always a priority.
So whether it's volunteer security personnel or we've actually hired professional security at these events just to make sure it's a safe environment for me as the candidate, for my family, for the attendees there. We want to make sure that, we take all the precautions necessary to make sure that everyone is safe.
But not everyone wants to talk about security. In fact, one member of a local campaign says they don't feel comfortable speaking about the issue. Others simply have not responded. We reached out to a local police practices expert for his take.
I've not seen, particularly in Florida, I've not seen any rhetoric or heard any rhetoric with regards to the differences in partisan parties and, threats made to candidates. But then again, I'm not in the political arena. He says candidates and campaign managers have to be more aware. I recommend strongly that each campaign manager maintain a very strong liaison with the local law enforcement.
And Todd, I asked that sheriff candidate if he will now think about only doing indoor events. He says it's something to think about, but he also says it's a shame that it's something we have to think about. Todd.
Angela Rozier. Angela, thank you so much for that. WPBF 25 News will have complete coverage of the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee that started just hours ago, as well as the investigation into the attempted assassination of Donald Trump and the dismissal of this classified documents case against Trump in Fort Pierce, as well as the appeal that's just been announced by the special counsel's office. If you scan the QR code you see on your screen, you can download the free WPBF 25 News app. We'll send out push alerts on all these stories for any breaking developments anytime to your phone or other device. And again, mark it down, 3 times Donald Trump has been nominated to be the GOP presidential candidate, happening in Milwaukee just about 3 hours ago, and J.D. Vance is his running mate.